Video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. The story only reveals what the storyteller wants it to reveal. And sometimes that is not what the audience needs to hear or wants to hear. That's a challenge. But that gap in the message, that's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. So stay tuned.
Master the Story Power Method to captivate your audience, improve workplace culture, and 10x your fundraising.
Scan the QR code to book your first coaching call or visit storypowercoach.com.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your personal growth plan at storypoweracademy.com for leadership development and communication skills training.
I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. In the years that I was in marketing in corporate America, I remember the first time I heard the phrase puffery. Puffery, it's a legal term. And did you know that you can actually find yourself in a lawsuit over puffery? Now that's different than a puffy. A puffy is that, well, in America we call it an ottoman. In England they call it a puffy because you put your feet on it. Yeah, that's not the same as puffery. Puffery is basically when something in your product description, your service offering, your brand statement, your mission statement is so overinflated, exaggerated, hyperbolic that the ability to deliver on it is basically nothing. We have the best ever. There will never, ever, ever, never, ever going to be another one as good as ours. Ours is the best. Ours is the most supreme, superior, built over, built under. Nothing is going to be as good. It is new and improved every day. It gets better than it was the day before. That would be puffery, exaggeration, hyperbole. And in marketing, a lot of people believe that's what sells. In fact, just spend a couple of minutes on social media and you'll see a dramatic contrast between people who are the newest, greatest, the latest. Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. And everything is awesome and wonderful and they have no downsides. It's a no risk 30-day money back guarantee. Well, except that if you buy it on Sunday, the guarantee doesn't apply at all. So by Monday, we're taking the money and you don't get it back. Those kind of sometimes puffery type guarantees, they're designed to be a hook to draw you in to get you to buy, but it's not the whole story. If you've ever been in that moment where you realize that the story that you're hearing and the story that you're listening for, they're miles apart. I mean, what you thought they were going to tell when you asked the question and what answer you got, they were not even related. I remember asking a guy when considering buying a used car, would you put your family in this car and drive to Mobile, Alabama? I was hoping for an honest opinion. The answer I got instead was, well, I don't know about Mobile, Alabama, but I've been to North Carolina with it. The geography's not hard. It's further to North Carolina from Dallas than it is to Mobile. I get that. It's easy for me to say, well, I've gone this far, then obviously it would go half that distance pretty easily, right? I'm not sure that the answer was honest, though. I mean, I did drive it to Mobile and back with no issues. I mean, we had one issue. The engine light came on, but we put some fuel additive in it, and even the engine light went away for that trip. But we called him immediately and said, hey, we've had it less than 24 hours. The engine light's already on. I'm a little concerned. Then we realized the tires on it could never have passed inspection, and yet it had an inspection sticker from last week. That's a little underhanded. We weren't getting the whole story. Well, after about 6 months of dealing with this car and literally it being in the shop more than it was in my driveway, I went back to the mechanic that had been working on it for the dealership that we bought it from. And I asked him, there's this one wire here that doesn't seem to fit any of the manual schematics or anything. And I'm just curious, what you think it might be for. Is it like to an amplifier that's no longer in the car? Is it, I mean, can I just yank it out and it wouldn't be a big deal? What, I mean, any ideas? Can you help me think through the process of where this wire is plugged in and where it might go to? He literally leaned back against the wall, put his hands in front of him like a little boy who'd been busted doing something he wasn't supposed to do. He said, yeah, I put that wire in there. I never suspected that the person who bought this car would ever end up at my shop. Okay. Say more. He said, well, that wire actually bypasses this and that and causes this and that to do this and that. And when all said and done, that's what allowed the car to run and leave here. But we knew that doing it wasn't going to be a forever fix. And in the time that that car was in that shop, we put a new fuel pump in. We tried to readjust the carburetor fuel injection system. We worked through the air intake system. We replaced fuses and modules and nodes, and never did work right. Then I paid another guy $500 to have it towed to his shop for him to look at it. And that yahoo not only didn't look at it, but I got a letter from the Arlington police that it had been abandoned in the parking lot at Burger King, but since it was registered to me, so I called the guy. I'm like, hey, where's my car? He's like, oh, it's in the shop. I'm like, no, it's actually in an impound lot because you left it at Burger King. He goes, oh, yeah. Truth is, we had to close our shop down and, we couldn't pay the rent. And so all the cars had to be moved out. And I'm like, well, so are you going to get my car? Do you plan to fix it? And he's like, no, I can't. I'm like, okay, then I need the money back. And he says, don't threaten me. The whole story isn't there. And if you had the whole story, you'd think, wow, what a nightmare of a story. But at some point, I could sharpen that whole story to a really fine point and say, yeah, I used to own a Mercedes, but I chose my Ford instead. It proved to be more reliable. I have a 96 Ford cargo van that I bought for $800 in 2018, just before we got rid of the Mercedes. And it's only been in the shop to get new tires on it. $800. But I used to have a Mercedes. I drove a Mercedes C-Class. I mean, I could post the pictures of the silver Mercedes that I used to have. I could tell you I used to have a Mercedes. I chose the Volvo instead. True story. All of those facts are actually very accurate, very provable. There's pictures of my wife in both the Mercedes and the Volvo. But is that the whole story? See, the challenge we have in leadership for a lot of people is that we forget that the portion of the story that the client needs to hear, that our posterity needs to hear, that those who are coming behind us, they don't just need the polished, pretty version. They don't need the TikTok, Amazon filter version. The Amazon, it's the best sellers list. Yeah, that's not what they're looking for. They need the cold, hard truth sometimes. They need you to be honest with yourself. Be a little more self-aware. I tried. I didn't do it so well. I screwed it up. Sorry. Here's what I learned, though. Don't do that again. See, I thought back when I bought that Mercedes, I remember a friend of mine, two different friends. One said, I love my old Mercedes. I've never had a lick of trouble out of it. And 2 weeks later, he sold it. Another one told me we were at a speaking engagement together, both of us on the stage. And she said, when she backed in the parking lot, I just got my Mercedes out of the shop. Again. I said, well, I love your Mercedes compared to my old Ford truck. She goes, I would take your old Ford truck over my Mercedes. And if you look up their original Blue Book prices, mine was a Ford Excursion 7.3 at the time. She said, if you looked up their Blue Book prices, yours is probably worth more when it was bought, and it's worth more now than mine. But hers was so pretty, a little shiny black E-Class. It was a pretty car. But in her words, it spent more time in the shop than she spent driving it. That's not a good brand reputation in Mercedes. Ironically, when you're in Europe, they're taxi cabs. A lot of people think if I've got a Mercedes, I've arrived, I've made it to the top. That's the brand statement. It's elegance, it's beauty, it's prowess, it's prosperity on display. But in Europe, it's a taxi, which here is like a Ford Crown Victoria. In Cuba, it's a 56 Buick. The ugly square thing when everything else was round and swoopy. It's the weird one, the oddball. In Germany, that's your Mercedes. Are you following me yet? See, the story, as the story changes from one place to another, it gives that what we call brand impression. You hear people talk about it, you see it in its place, you read about those, and you think, oh, yes, that's what I'm looking for. I want to look like that, feel like that, be like that. And so the story they tell you may not necessarily be all of the truth. If the story is crafted for what you want to hear, what you need to hear to get you to make the buying decision, that story is a different story, perhaps, than the whole truth and nothing but the truth. On the other hand, if what they tell you is the whole truth and nothing but the truth, you might find yourself in a place where you're thinking, yeah, that's not a decision I want to make. Now, here's where the real rub comes in, and that is when the story that you're telling about your organization is all puffery. From the marketing standpoint, from the hiring standpoint, from the job description standpoint. I've been in many jobs where I was hired on with the job description, with a pay scale, and if it had turned out to be what they said it was going to be, man, that would have been awesome. I remember sitting in a job interview. I'd been selling advertising and print advertising, and actually sold printing for years as well before I went into this job interview. And the guy was telling me about how awesome his magazine was, and how many publications they'd put out and how many copies they put out and blah, 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 blah. And he said, man, you could make $85,000 to $100,000 a year selling this publication. I said, that's pretty good pay. I said, what is your commission structure? And he told me, and I said, okay, what's your ad rate? And he told me, and I'm doing the math in my head. I'm like, okay, so $1,500 a page with a 25% commission. That means I get about $375 for every full page ad that I sold. And if I do easy math, 400 times what to get 80,000? Well, I got to sell about 200 pages of ads. Okay, how many pages does your magazine print right now? About 35. Okay, and how many times a year to publish? 4. So that's only 165. So if I sold every page in every edition of every magazine, and I sold the full page ad, there'd be no places for like half-page ads, quarter-page ads, editorial content, little picture books with characters that pop up. None of that. It'd be a full book of ads. And if I sold the whole thing every time at a full page rate, then I could make 80,000. But he just claimed to me he had 2 or 3 people already making that. That story didn't add up. He talked a good game, but he told a story that I didn't want to hear or didn't need to hear, because it wasn't hard for me, having the experiences that I had, to realize his story was a story. It was fiction. Might as well be a puppet show. It meant absolutely nothing. It had no merit to it. But see, we often find ourselves in that puffery phase where we're building up our business because people don't want to buy a business that's a failure. They don't want to buy from someone who can't keep it all together. They want to know that you've got the experience, the credentials, the credibility. They want to know that your story really lines up with what they're looking for. And the challenge is that sometimes we, as the old phrase is, don't believe your own press. We find ourselves building these stories for the purpose of getting the buyers in the door. And then we begin to believe all the stuff we said to get them in the door. And by that I mean, we believe that we can actually deliver on that when we have no history of having done so. We believe that we can actually deliver on that when nobody on our team even knows that's what we promised. And there's this conflict, this tension between promises made and promises delivered, promises made and promises kept, productivity promised and productivity delivered. And when the story that we put out there for our marketing or advertising, we try to promote it as our brand. As our brand is a key part of that phrase I just made, because your brand isn't really what you put on the label, slap on the billboard, put in the byline. No, your brand is actually what other people say about you when you walk out of the room. And if you've promised to deliver on time, if you've promised to deliver to this quality, if you've promised to deliver this or your money back guarantee, If those are the promises you're making, your brand has to stand up to those promises. Now, here's where the real rub happens. When your team doesn't know you made that promise, it happens on a regular basis. In fact, when I'm being sold something, I often will ask the salesperson, is this promise that you're making me that you're going to deliver this, that it's going to happen like this, that you're going to do this, is that in writing? Oh, we don't have to put it in writing. You do. You actually do. Because that's very important to me, and I'm buying based on that promise. And if you don't deliver on that promise, I'm going to want my money back. Oh, we don't have to go to all that trouble. I mean, this is standard operating procedure for us. Great. Document your procedure. Write it down. Because see, here's what happens often. The salesperson sells what the product team can't deliver. And when the product team can't deliver it, they go back to the writing. They're like, well, it's not in there. I recently, right here in my hometown, ordered a product. I stood there with the production person, looking over their shoulder, making sure that what they were designing was exactly what I wanted. I looked at it on the screen. I said, nah, let's not do it like that. Let's make it that font a little bit bigger. Let's do it like this. They created it, they saved the file, they put it on the computer, they wrote it down on the sheet, but they didn't write down on the sheet that it was the new file they just created. And so when production time came around, they produced an old file. And when I went to pick up my product, I said, that's not what I ordered. And they pulled out the paper and they're like, I didn't write anything different down. I said, okay, let's see if you recall this. And this is the second or third time with this in particular business that this has happened. The first time I said, check your text messages, because we talked back and forth about this. And they're like, oh, you're right. Let me fix that. The second time, they're like, yeah, I think your wife ordered it, so I don't know what to tell you. This time, I said, let me paint the scene for you. I've got a near photographic memory, not quite, but pretty close. I can tell you what side I was standing on, what color shirt you were wearing, what day of the week it was, what time I was here. I probably even have a text message from somebody else to validate the time. Let me check. And now the memory's starting to come back. And they're like, oh yeah, you're right. I remember creating that file. I remember typing those. I just don't know why it's not saved on my desk. I don't know why it's not in your phone. I don't know why I didn't write it on the paper. I'm like, I understand that. But when I stood there and you said, this is what we're going to do, and you did something different than that, that's not my fault. And I shouldn't have to pay for your mistake and the correction. And so we negotiated and we worked out a deal, and I'll still use them. Here's what I know though. I won't walk out of them until I see every note written down on a piece of paper, because I know they can deliver on the promises they make as long as they don't forget the promises they made. And in this particular stance, the salesperson and the production person are the same person. So it's a little easier to make sure it translates across. I just know as a client, I have to make sure to articulate that clearly, exactly what I want, and see that it's written down. Then there's no issue. See, how many times do you find that in your business that your marketing team has created a message that works really well to get the hearer to hear what the hearer wants to hear, to get the hearer to hear what the hearer needs to hear to make a buying decision? And the salesperson absolutely tells that customer exactly what they want to hear. But then when it gets to production, you realize, yeah, we don't even do that. We don't even make those. That's not in our wheelhouse. That's not our expertise. That's not our experience. I mean, you made a promise. We can't keep up. That story gap, the story told by marketing, the story told by sales, the story delivered by production. When there's a gap in that story, that's the leader's fault. That's the person at the top. That's the person who probably sat in a board meeting with a team of creatives, maybe a third-party agency, maybe just the C-suite, maybe a couple of executive directors in there, and sat with that team and said, we need a vision statement and a mission statement. And they craft these in a vacuum where nobody's asking, what does the client really want to hear? Or what is the salesperson actually going to say? Or what can the production team actually deliver? They're not asking those questions. They're asking, what would sound most real? What would sound intelligent and well thought out, executable? What would sound easy to reproduce and to quote, to put on a sign? I've actually been in meetings where they adjust the mission statement based on the number of characters because it wouldn't tweet. If the only parameter for whether or not that's an effective mission statement is can you tweet it, you're in trouble. I mean, today you would have to exit. Pun intended. You're going to have to X that brand statement because you can't exit, you can't tweet it, it's too long. You got too many characters in that statement. Look, if your brand statement and your mission statement and your vision statement are so long that you can't post them within 244 characters, you should probably consider revamping them anyway. However, I want to give you some reasonable tips on how you can get your brand story, the story other people tell about you when you walk out of the room, and your mission statement to partner up in a way that when people experience your service, your product, your delivery, what they naturally say is what you called your brand statement. And when they naturally say, oh man, I went to such and such a place, I had the best meal I've ever had. I love the smell of the smoke in the barbecue. It's in the air when you walk in. You feel like you're walking out like you've been standing next to the fire pit yourself for hours. And the brisket baked potato tastes just like that. If I made it at home, I couldn't do any better than that. That's the kind of barbecue I want. But that's the kind of barbecue everybody wants. They want to know that it tastes just like I would have done it myself, but I didn't have to sweat over the grill and I didn't have to stand there smelling like smoke. But man, it tastes just like I did. That's what everybody wants. That's the kind of brand statement you want. That's what the customer wants to hear. When your customer is telling the story that the other customer wants to hear, you have this really fascinating marketing thing called word of mouth. But when you tell people, oh, it's just like you cooked it at home, only you don't have to smell like sweat and smoke. And then they walk in and they taste it, they're like, that tastes exactly like the one at so-and-so's place. I bet they came from the same box. Now you got a problem. Now you got a real problem. Because your brand identity, your brand statement, your marketing slogans don't live up. Your story's got a gap in it. You're saying things that you can't back up. Canary, alligator, yeah. So here's 3 questions that you can ask, and I challenge you to write these down. If you don't want to write them down, just go to Spotify, go to Apple, go to YouTube, go to Facebook, go to OBBM, anywhere that you can watch this podcast, scroll to the bottom of the description, and you'll find these 3 questions in the text, but I'm going to give them to you right here. Here's your first question. What expectations, this is the question you're asking your customer so that your brand statement, the story they're going to tell other people about you, and your mission statement are married. What expectations did we fail to meet in the products or the services that we provided? See, here's another odd challenge with human beings, and that is, let me express it like this. My wife and I have been married almost 32 years. And if we walk out of the studio right now and we go get in the car and I say, hey, what's for dinner? My first answer from her is always the same. I don't know. She may have been hungry for hours and the answer is still, I don't know. That's not the real answer. The real answer might actually be, I know what I'd like to have, but it's not in the budget. I know what I'd like to have, but we don't have time. I know what I'd like to have, but we don't have one of those here. It could be any one of those answers, but the truth of the matter is the disappointment that comes from, okay, fine, we're going to Wendy's. No, well, I like Wendy's. She doesn't like Wendy's. She doesn't want to go to Wendy's. I love their chili. I love their burgers, believe it or not. And I love a chocolate Frosty. She doesn't want to go to Wendy's. That's the ultimate disappointment. If she said, go wherever you want to, and I drove into that parking lot, she might sit in the car and cry while I eat and never come in to eat. She so dislikes Wendy's. However, if she never said that, and I delivered on taking her wherever I want to go, the disappointment is still there. Never expressed expectations can still be missed. What expectations did we fail to meet? You don't have to accuse your customer of not clearly expressing those expectations, but they probably have some subconsciously. They probably have some from a past experience. They probably have some they don't even know how to verbalize. They just know when they can get what they wanted, when they're a little bit dissatisfied, when they're a little bit disappointed. It's a little less than, But if you don't ask them, they won't tell you. Second question. What expectations did we fail to meet in the products and services we promised? What expectations did we fail to meet that we promised? Maybe they were in the brand statement. Maybe they were in the money back guarantee. Maybe they were what everybody else has said. When you go here, you're going to experience that. And I got here and I was like, are all these people lying to me? Are they delusional? Did they really experience that? Because I'm not getting anything close to that. Third question. What expectations did we surpass? What expectations did we surpass in the products and services that we promised? I told you I was going to do this, this, and this. And you got this and this, and wow. That's how you build raving fans. You meet the expectations that you promised to meet, and you exceed them. But I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, very few things will overcome unmet expectations. As a leader, I don't care if it's your personnel, I don't care if it's your investors, I don't care if it's your consumer. The people who actually pay you to do the work that you do are the consumers, the customers, the ones that pull out the cash, flip out the credit card. Those are the ones that you've got to satisfy first. Board members, yeah, eventually. Stakeholders, yeah, at some point. Shareholders, absolutely, at some point. You have a legal obligation to them. But if you don't satisfy your customers and meet the expectations that they have, you don't have a chance in doing those other things. Do not underestimate the power of the story in doing that. That story that says we had this one customer who was really, really happy because we did A, B, and C, and this one customer who was really, really disappointed because we didn't do D, E, and F. And I hate to say it, but we now realize that we can't offer D, E, and F. And if that's what you're looking for, we've got some recommendations for you, but that's not us. When insurance companies first started saying, oh, we realize we're not for everyone. First off, we're going to give you a quote, but those guys are cheaper. Those guys are better suited for you. Part of what they did was rule out the people who are going to be a high risk with a low return. They want really small premiums and kind of coverage because they just got to meet the basic legal minimums. On the other hand, we've got this guy who's got this enormous house and he's fine with paying the deductible. He just wants to know if that $2 million house burns down, we're covering the house. And if his son crashes a Ferrari, we're covering the Ferrari. He's not worried about the deductible and he's not worried about the premium. And that's the kind of customer we want. When they realized that, they told a different story. We'll help you shop around. If you're not our ideal customer and we're not your ideal provider, we'll point you in the right direction. When your story lines up, brand and mission, what you tell them you're going to do and what you're actually capable of, when those line up, when they marry together, you'll completely change the way you do business. And you'll start repeating that story from the very top to the bottom, from the C-suite focus group to the lowest level employee that nobody even knows works here until they go to get a Starbucks. And people are like, hey, so what do you do? Well, I work at so-and-so. What do y'all do there? We do A, B, and C. We don't do D, E, and F. How do they know that? Because the story from the top comes through the entire company. It permeates the language, and it doesn't have a story gap. That's on you as the leader to write that story in a way that it answers the questions the audience wants to hear and needs to hear. It answers them completely and truthfully. It's repeatable by your customers as a brand statement, and it's definable and executable as a mission statement. Now you have the whole story, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Think storytelling's just for bedtime? Nah, it's the secret sauce for business magic. Stuck in a rut with bland pitches and yawning clients? Enter Boost Your Business with Story Power. 6 weeks of epic storytelling training. It's like leveling up in a video game but for your career. Master the art of narrative and watch connections blossom like a viral TikTok. Simple, impactful, and game-changing. Ready to transform your biz vibes? Dive in now and make storytelling your superpower.
This 6 weeks guided program is specifically designed for those people who say, I know I need to tell stories. I need to tell better stories because the ones I have are boring or they're not getting across. Or as John Maxwell says, everyone communicates and, well, few connect. Now, as a participant in this course, what I would really love to know from you, put it in the discussion on the course if you're already registered online. Send me a chat, send me a DM, send me a text, send me an email. I'd really love to know what you hope to get out of this course. Now, I can tell you what we're going to discuss, and I can tell you what I plan to teach and train you on, and I can tell you even what we plan to discuss each week on the calls for the next 6 weeks. I'm going to go over all of that for you in just a moment. I can also tell you that my clients who get the greatest success are the ones who apply the Story Power process to their business development to increase their impact, their influence, and their income. Now, the Story Power process includes story mining, story selection, story qualification, story crafting, connecting with your audience, and leading the narrative. And if you leave any one of those parts out, you're going to find that, well, you're just not as effective as you want to be. You're not going to grow your business to the same level. You're not going to lead with impact and influence like you hope to. I can also tell you that the people who apply these things, well, they're not failing in their business. The reason a lot of people fail in their business is they continue to fail to connect the solution they offer with the problem that their clients have. The pain and the solution never come together. And a lot of that failure is because they're not clearly articulating how their solution solves someone else's problem. It comes down to a question something like this: who do you help and how? Yes, that's one of the first things we're going to discuss over the next 6 weeks of Boost Your Business with Story Power.
Master the Story Power method to captivate your audience, improve workplace culture, and 10x your fundraising.
Scan the QR code to book your first coaching call or visit storypowercoach.com.
Subscribe now for our